what we could start with is kind of, just going over your passion for the organization that you created and how much of yourself you put into it. We'll kind of talk about that first and that creativity that you had to bring. And then, so it tells the whole complete story of how it got into Founders Syndrome.
Sure. So I started my nonprofit in, um, and and the focus of it was to create arts recovery programs for trauma survivors, specifically dealing with people who've been through domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that, and that was a passion for me, mainly because I had gone through this really just transformative process where I was in grad school, and uh, I had some unresolved trauma that I ended up really dealing with for the first time, and music was a huge part of that. So because of that, like I started searching for programs specifically for like a songwriting programs for survivors, things like that, and I couldn't find any where I was. But it still took me a while to start the organization. But then once it started, then it was my baby. So it was
And
something. Oh, go ahead.
oh, and your background is in music, though, right? Like that's what you
Yes.
studied. That is where your creativity lies.
Yeah, exactly. So I studied jazz studies, and at the time that I got the idea for the organization, I was pursuing a master's in jazz studies from Michigan State. So it was something that was deeply personal for me. And I think that that's something, for anyone who starts a for-profit company, a nonprofit, whatever it is that you start, it's usually personal to you in some way, at least for you to want to work that hard, as far as incorporating and doing all of the registrations and paperwork and gathering support, all of those things. So it just takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of energy and investment,
Can you
to really start these things.
can you kind of walk us through that? I don't think a lot of people know the nonprofit sector as well as you do, so they're not aware of all the steps you had to take to actually get your idea into reality and actually helping people.
I mean, it really starts with doing the basics of registering in your state, and then from there, now that's just the state, being able to register as a nonprofit. Then you have to go through that whole federal process, the 501(c)(3) application process, to where it costs roughly $850 just to submit the application. And this application is not tiny. You have to submit a lot of information along with your actual your bylaws, your initial founding board members, and officers. Like, you really have to have all of this information together, and if you've already been doing the work, you also have to have a lot of like any program materials, if you have a curriculum. So getting all of those things together took about a year, and I did it as part of I
So
mean, I kind of did it the wrong way,
at
so.
at one point, are you functioning as a nonprofit but not under a nonprofit kind of umbrella, and you're just trying to gather your information and you're like, because you mentioned like curriculum. So how do you
Mhm.
develop curriculum if you don't know the direction? Like, how did you create the entire direction of the company, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, so basically you have to start off with a problem that you're trying to solve, a method for trying to solve it, and then having details, as far as the overall mission statement, the overall vision of the organization, how you plan to grow it. So it's almost like a for-profit business who has a business plan. You kind of have to have a strategic plan for nonprofits. So I actually spent a year creating the curriculum for the nonprofit first. So even before I had actual programs running, I did have the curriculum, And that's how I actually ended up getting funding to do my first pilot project, because I took the time to get organized, and I learned that from working for other nonprofits and understanding that process.
That's amazing. Thank you for giving us that background. I'm going to do a quick introduction here.
Mhm.
You're in the MedStarter Healthcare Innovator space. Tonight, we're talking with Tamara Williams, and she has started her nonprofit organization, but recently she stepped away. And the reason we're going to be discussing tonight is a thing called founder syndrome. And I had never heard about founder syndrome until Tamara told me about it. So I thought it was a great topic for all the innovators out there. I know a lot of you put yourself 100% into your projects, and sometimes we can become overwhelmed. So that's the gist of what we're talking about tonight. And on stage, we have Tamara Williams, who comes from a musical background. We have Dipti and Sophie. They are our regular moderators, and we'll give them a chance to intro themselves as well. So I guess I'll pass it to you tomorrow to do your intro, and then we'll pass it to Dipti and Sophie, and we'll go back to your passion for this project.
Sure. Once again, everyone, my name is Tamara Williams. I'm the founder of Music Beyond Measure, which creates arts recovery programs for trauma survivors. And I'll pass it to Dipti.
Oh, hi everybody. I work in strategy consulting and I just am here for support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipti. And Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, sorry I'm late. Thank you, Taya. So good to see you, Tamara. So glad you're here. And Deepthi, thank you for joining us. I'm Sophie Yohanan.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara, for coming. Excellent. So, Taya, what was the question that you wanted to start off with?
We're just doing intros, Dipti, and then
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, and then we're gonna talk about the passion that Tamara put into the project, because I think that's really important for everyone to understand how much of yourself goes into developing these nonprofits.
Yeah, definitely. I I'm not a founder, but I'm really interested in this topic. I am a clinical evaluation scientist and I work at a medical device company called Boston Scientific. And every company started somewhere, right? Every idea started with an innovation, one person with a dream, and maybe two people, five people who banded together to realize this dream. So we're all here to learn, and I'm really excited to have Tamara here. Thank you, Tamara, for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I think, yes, this is a universal issue, right? We see it not just in the nonprofit sector, but in all sectors where people have these projects that they really connect with themselves. And I think we'll get into that a little bit tomorrow. So we talked about how you've spent over a year developing the curriculum and getting through the government approval process for your nonprofit. What were the next steps for you?
So here's the thing: the government approval process is not something that I did right away, and I'm glad that I didn't, because it's better that you actually have some programming under your belt, and it's also better for you to be fiscally sponsored for a little bit prior to becoming a certified nonprofit. But basically, after doing that for a couple of years, of being fiscally sponsored, then I finally went through that process of getting the 501(c)(3) status. And like I said, it's something to where I probably could have gone through, like a pro bono partnership. They provide free services to nonprofits. However, the issue is timeline. They're doing it for free, so you kind of have to wait your turn. And at that point, when I finally did it, I actually went through and did the application on my own. That's how driven I was to really get things off the ground and really get that status. I consulted with um with someone who has experience in submitting those applications, and that was extremely helpful. But then I actually went through and filled out the application myself. Put the whole package together, and got it done. So once you have that status, then it kind of frees you up to pursue funding, in different ways.
And so when you talk about funding, I think a lot of people in the innovation space understand that as, getting investors, and but your funding is a little bit different because you're dealing with grants and government
Hmm.
sponsorships. So you actually have to put a lot of effort into those, right? It's a process to write out these grants and these requests. It's not easy to get grants, right? Can you explain
Not at
that
all.
process?
um, uh, so I kind of feel like every grant process and every foundation has a different grant process that you kind of have to pay attention to what their priorities are. But grant writing is just part of it, though, because you have to pursue other funding sources. And I think that because you have that nonprofit status, automatically everyone thinks, okay, well, you have to just apply for grants. You have to apply for grants. You also have to do some fundraising. You also have to figure out ways that that you can generate earned income, which is basically fee for service or a product, based on your nonprofit, and then also just building up that community base to get individual donations and buy-in, because a large portion of an organization's funding comes from individual donations, even more so than grants.
I was going to ask next, the structure of your nonprofit. So, when you started this, did you have a vision in your mind of how you wanted that structure, that governance structure to look like? Or did you have to kind of base it on what you'd seen other nonprofits do? How did you create that structure?
It was a combination thereof, so having worked for other nonprofits and understanding, okay, I have to have a board. It's good to have these particular types of people on the board. Someone who functions as the board chair, someone who functions as the secretary, as the treasurer. And then that also took some self-guided learning on my own. Whatever classes that I could take, whatever books that I could read. It was a combination thereof of just understanding how governance within a nonprofit is supposed to happen. It doesn't mean that I always did it right, because as we're going to talk about, founder syndrome is a big thing, and you kind of get tied up in the vision and the mission, and it becomes your baby, and that's actually the problem. It's your baby.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what positives you felt you saw in the beginning. What were the things that just kept you going and kept you vested in the organization? Because your organization was 10 years old, Tamara, or
Uh, it's it'll be 10 years old in 2023.
okay, so
Yes,
almost 10 years
yes.
old. So you were
Hmm.
deeply invested in this for several years. What
Yep.
was it about this organization that just kept you going, that motivated you? And then when did that motivation stop?
So, what kept me going is the fact that I knew that what I was doing would be helpful to the populations that I wanted to serve. I was really focused on, wanting to work with those traumatized populations, because I understood what that felt like, and I kept thinking to myself that this doesn't have to be, this trauma and everything that you deal with uh, emotionally doesn't have to be forever. So I saw it as like way out. This is a way out for those who have gone through difficulties, and focusing on that and trusting in the process, and knowing that the programming would work is really what kept me going. I can't say that the passion ever stopped, but I had to make a difficult decision recently, to where I had to walk away from the organization, not to kind of like, leave it alone and say, all right, guys, good luck. But I realized that with where I am right now in this moment, and Taya, all of the various things that occurred over the past 2 years. I just kind of realized that in order for the organization to grow in the way that I'd like it to, the best thing that I can do for the longevity of the organization is to walk away and hand the reins over to someone else. And it was the hardest decision because once again, it's your baby.
It has to have been completely horrific to have to make that decision. And I know, I know a little bit of the history of why it got there. We don't have to get into that, but I wanted to know what were
Mhm.
the signs that you felt this was actually in an unhealthy space, right? Because I think that's the thing about founder syndrome is that it's actually it becomes an unhealthy part of your life where you're
Mhm.
completely consumed by the organization, and people can't even separate you from that organization, right? You just, you're so closely connected.
Right. Yeah. So that is the difficult part. What kind of got me to the point of realizing, okay, this is time. I mean, the pandemic did a number on several businesses, across the world. Um, and what's interesting is in 2020, when everything first started, I actually ended up working more, more so than I was, even pre-COVID. And I have a 7-year-old daughter who was in kindergarten during that time, and I had to be forced to, okay, I have to make sure that this organization keeps going, and I have to make sure that she's okay with school and everything else. And then all of a sudden, my life just became insanity, even more so than it was prior to COVID. And I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped focusing on me because I was so focused on my daughter and focused on the organization, and it got to this point where I felt this exhaustion that I can't describe. And this is, exhaustion from constantly just being so tied into everything that you're doing. And then now, you add a pandemic and add a child on top of that, and guiding her education and all of these different things. And I've never been that tired before in my entire life. And it got to the point where I had to reach out to one of the board members and say, we need to talk, because
Tamara,
I don't know that I can come back from this.
I know I wasn't there with you, but I'm getting the sense that this is more like spiritual exhaustion, right? Or,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like there was a pace that we all worked pre-pandemic, and then there's this new pace that we all had to get used to, that was jarring to most of us. But then my pre-pandemic pace was already hectic. It was already a lot. And then when everything first started, my work pace became even more frantic, actually, because I was afraid. And that fear drove me to work harder, which worked in some respects, but like killed me spiritually. Because there were just so many other things to think about all at the same time. It was just a lot.
Yeah, because not only are you, trying to keep up with the inflow of support with the grants and the funding, but you're also trying to keep up with the space that you rented for the business, and then the
Hmm.
artists that you have to, compensate for their time, and
Hmm.
it's, and then going online from being in person to going online, I'm sure was uh, changing the whole aspect of your business.
Yeah, it changed everything, and it was all of those things that you just said. And so all of those things on top of, making sure that I'm staying up to date with registrations, making sure that I'm still paying the bills of the organization and being able to cover those bills, being concerned about my teaching artists and saying, okay, they've lost all of their other income. I at least have to keep paying them. How am I going to do that? when we've taken a hit, and you have all of this fear that's driving all of your actions. So I'm a person where fear has been something that has caused me to like work harder, and I had to realize that's actually a trauma response, you know um, uh, because at the end of the day, you want to be motivated to work harder, just because you don't want to do it out of fear. But I think that the pandemic just put people in a different space mentally, because we had so many other things that were happening all at the same time, and it was just a different feeling.
And I know that when people talk about music beyond measure, they say Tamara. Tamara is music beyond measure. So how do you start to separate yourself from the brand and let the brand move forward? What are the steps that you need to take mentally for that to happen?
Oh, self-care for one, and having to think about, and thankfully I went through this leadership program a few years ago, where that's actually where I heard of founder syndrome. I went to this leadership program through Rutgers Business School, and I was one of maybe two other founders in that program, and I literally mourned the loss of the organization. Even though I was still doing it, I mourned it, just knowing that, oh my gosh, like one day I'm going to have to walk away, because I couldn't see myself beyond the organization, because I was so, intertwined with it. Then, fast forward, when it came time, to where I started listening to myself more, and really focusing on self-care, and really separating myself and saying, look, this organization, to survive, cannot be just me. It has been me this entire time, but since I love it so much, and I'm so passionate about it, and I care about it so much, then I have to know when to let it go. And I have to know when it's time for me to focus on, okay, this has been so much of your life for so many years. What is your next chapter? Being able to focus on what's ahead versus what you're leaving behind is a huge part of that process. At least it's been for me. I don't know if anyone has a different opinion about that, but that's how I've been dealing with it, is really focusing on taking care of myself, and then thinking about, okay, now you get to build your next chapter. So what are the structures you can put in place with the organization now to ensure that they can keep going beyond you, if that's what they choose. That's always what you hope when you found something, and especially once you hand it over, you hope that they will continue that and grow it beyond, but beyond your own stronghold. Let's put it that way.
Thank you for coming here and sharing your story. I think it's really important to talk about things like founder syndrome, because people don't generally talk about that and what they're going through. So I think it's a really important story to tell. But I will pass it around to either Dipti or Sophie for their questions, and we can open it to the audience if others in the audience have questions or they themselves went through founder syndrome at one point. Please raise your hand and we'll bring you up to discuss. Dipti, did you have any questions?
Oh, no, not at the moment.
Okay, Sophie, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I have a question. So, Tamara, I've been listening to your story, how I think you did a lot of introspection. Ooh, I see a friend in the audience. Hi, David. Just wanted to say hi. Um, it sounds like you did a lot of introspection to figure out what you can and cannot do, what exactly was happening to you during this time. And my question to you would be, how did you dig yourself out? What was the solution you found for yourself and for your family? And how has that gotten to where you are now, the point where you are now? Can you tell us a little bit about that journey from, being in the hole and figuring out that you are in a hole and you need to climb out, to climbing out to getting to this point to today?
I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm fully out of it yet. It's something that I feel like I have to keep focusing on my own self care each day, and looking towards the future. And it's really making a daily choice. I have to make a choice every day to ensure that I'm looking ahead, and not looking behind me. Because if you take too much time to look behind you, then you think about all of the things that you did wrong. Especially like me just understanding more about like founder syndrome, and understanding uh how deep it is. Like it's extremely depressing when you think about it. Because you feel like, oh my gosh, like I wasn't being the best leader, not because I didn't want to be, but because I was just so blinded by this passion and this vision, and having such a stronghold over how this vision was carried out. So it's really a daily decision on, at least for me, as far as focusing on, on the future, and then also being able to kind of say, okay, well, what information can I give to the organization, that will kind of help them function. So that's something that I've kind of been in contact with the board chair about, is passing along info, handing over registrations and information, and kind of going through that process. And it seems like the more information that I release, the better I feel, because then I feel like, oh wow, I'm really letting this go, and handing it over to the board, for them to really say, okay, well, let us function as a board is supposed to function, and do this the right way.
And you briefly had mentioned when you were going through the leadership program, you thought, oh, there are some mistakes I made along the way. What are those mistakes that you wish you didn't make? Are there things that you wish you knew um, at the time?
Oh, there are there are way too many to recall. You absolutely make mistakes, but that's how you learn. That's how you figure out how things get done. So um, I see everything as a learning opportunity. What I should have done from the very beginning was really um, allow the board to do what a board is supposed to do. But that's once again going back to that idea of like, you're the founder, this is your baby, this is your vision, you, and that's the mistake that I made. Well, one of many, but it was something that just kind of challenged me to kind of say, okay, well, in the future, and if I had to take on a different role, what would I do differently? So I spent the entire time just kind of like evaluating how I could improve my own leadership skills, and how everything that I've learned throughout that process, and still learning, I wish that I would have applied to the organization. Yes, I was still leading, but I was leading, and in a way that wasn't healthy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As that I feel like when you love something so much, you want to have control over it. So it's hard to let the board or anyone else tell you what to do with what you love. Um, but thank you, Alex, for joining us on stage. Did you have a question that you would like to add to the conversation?
Um, I just got here, so I when I saw the title Founder Syndrome 101, I thought a number of things, um, but I don't know exactly where Tamara is coming from on this one. So I just heard a little bit there, and I was just reading her profile, so I'm just catching up still. So, but I pinged folks into the room, so hopefully those who came, welcome to MedStarter Room. This is your MedStarter Healthcare Innovator Club, your home for all sorts of things about healthcare innovation. And I'm really glad to support Taya, Sophie, Dipti, and Tamara in this room. So I don't have a lot of questions yet, but I'm sure I will. Just give me a little time.
Thanks,
Okay,
Alex. I
thank
think
you.
Tamara, is that how you pronounce it? Tamara?
Yes.
Mara,
Okay, good. I just want to
I'm
clarify.
sorry. You
Thanks.
can call me Alex or whatever you want. Or hold on, Dipti, what's the person that I looked like when I was wearing Sandra's glasses? I changed over to the heavy metal
Oh, I
gnome
noticed. No,
look. You know,
I like the other ones better. Iris Apfel.
thank you. I never remember her name. Anyway, so yes, I just had to counteract that look for a minute. Not that I don't love Sandra Washington, who was here before, whose glasses those are. Oh, she's still here.
He's here.
Cool. Yeah. Anyway, just homage. Okay, I'm gonna shut up for a minute. And sorry about messing up your name, Tamara. I'll continue to mess it up. I'd apologize, but I can't help it.
Thank you, Alex. So Tamara, one of the things you mentioned that you would allow the board to work as a board. What other tips would you give to people that are founders themselves so that they don't end up being burnt out and having, um, to suffer from founder syndrome?
Well, that's the thing. So, founder syndrome, it actually isn't just limited to founders. It's board members who have been around for a very long time, who who don't want to let go. It can be staff members who have been around for a long time because, of course, the longer you're there, then the more history you have, and then you end up staying because you're tied to the mission in some way. You know, there are several ways to kind of combat this, but at the end of the day, it's really being clear about the roles and responsibilities of the board and of the staff, and it really takes uh, board members, to really be adamant about, hey, this is what we do, and this is and this is what we're supposed to do. Like we're supposed to be the checks and balances. And what tends to happen is, since you're the founder, then you have the respect of being the founder, and no one really wants to challenge or really say anything, but you actually should, because anyone who cares about the mission of any organization or any for-profit business, if you care about that company, um, you have to be willing to step up and say, hey, how can we best support you so that we can do what we're supposed to do, and you can do what you're supposed to do, and how can we clarify responsibilities, to make sure that no one's stepping on any toes, and that there are checks and balances. you
That
know
I
um,
think is key for any organization to whether you're a founder or a board member or a director or individual contributor at any level. That clear definition of roles and responsibilities across the board, and redefining and re-clarifying roles and responsibilities is so key. I've noticed so many um, discrepancies and miscommunications happen just because of a lack of clear definition of those roles. Where does my responsibility end and yours begin? And then where does yours end and somebody else's begin? I think that's so, so important. And of course, sometimes those responsibilities can overlap as long as everyone is aware and agrees to where they overlap, and we can work together, collaborate to fulfill some of those. But there should be a clear communication and an agreement on those. I think that's so key. Thank you for bringing that up.
I'll do a really quick reset for some of the new people that have joined us. We are in the MedStarter Healthcare Innovators space, and tonight we are speaking with Tamara Williams. She's the founder of Music Beyond Measure. She recently stepped down from Music Beyond Measure due to founder syndrome, which is a term that is used when you intertwine your work with your life so much that it's very hard to separate the two. And for example, with Tamara, I've often heard people say, "Oh, Tamara is Music Beyond Measure." It's almost the same thing when they're talking about it. They mean they're talking about her as well. So for her to step away is a huge deal and very difficult. um, to take on. So that is what we're discussing tonight, is when you feel like you've had that point where you need to step down, or maybe even just lessen your responsibilities at your organization and let others step in to bring the organization where your vision still wants it to go, right? Because Tamara, I think you can speak to your love for Music Beyond Measure. You still love the organization and you still have a vision for it, but you just see the unhealthy relationship that you had with it, and where that was taking you. Is that kind of where what I understood? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you never know how your love for the organization and your lack of boundaries are affecting other people. So I would actually like to hear from people who, you know, may be in that situation, whether you're a founder yourself or if you're a person who has worked for someone, because we all have at some point worked for someone who has suffered from that. You know, what was that experience like for you, and what were your takeaways, you know, moving forward from that experience?
So you're saying you can actually separate yourself from your brand, from your company? That sounds like, that's I don't know what you're talking about. So
I'm all for that.
I've struggled with this, and I wouldn't say struggle because I don't dislike, being the brand, but the brand is MedStarter, and I'm the guy on stage, and especially here on Clubhouse. But when we run events, I'm the MC, not the star of the show, right? And even like in Clubhouse stuff, I'm usually top left corner, pinging people in, supporting things, keeping the conversation going. But I'm not the expert, right? And it's not even about the expert so much as it is about the community and things like that. So, but still being the center of the community, and having Twitter accounts under Alex B. Fair and MedStarter, it's just like on IG, the Alex B. Fair account is dominant. On Twitter, the MedStarter account is dominant. And same thing with like Facebook and every other media platform. So, so separating certainly in social media, is a challenge. And at what point does the brand become me or me become the brand? I mean, and if I, decide to, get on stage and, belt out, some AC/DC song like I did the other night, I mean, and I tweeted out as MedStarter, would that be weird, right? But then again, if all the Alex B. Fair accounts have, you know, um, MedStarter stuff on it, But anyway, so at some
You're
point when I was
affiliated
going,
regardless, right? Like you're affiliated. Like you can't separate the two.
right, but when I want to go beyond me, right? So we set up programs for like cities and big companies and things like that, and they don't want to hire Alex B. Fair. They want to hire the MedStarter team, which is like 35 people who do all sorts of stuff, social media experts and things like that. So while I might be, the guy who, thought of everything and tells people what to do, at the end of the day, it's all under the MedStarter brand, right? So, at one point, I made a conscious effort to make sure that the MedStarter brand was held up, up top. So, obviously all the websites are MedStarter FEC, MedStarter's the name all over everything. But yeah, it's definitely some brand confusion. Um, so
One
I, I I don't
I,
have a clear answer except that the, in social media you definitely have to be a person, not a brand.
yes.
But you have to hold the brand, and then where do you, how much do you let your freak flag fly? In public. I mean, whether it's liking to sing, which isn't part of my company. I can understand as part of your company. Um, but I mean, how does that fit with MedStarter? Does it? And then if you look at like our t-shirts, and our a lot of our branding, it definitely has that rock star kind of feel. So is the brand rock star or is it healthcare innovation, right? So anyway, I don't know what the right answer is, except that my answer is just be me and talk about MedStarter, and I'm just the guy who happens to run MedStarter, who happens to have some attributes which are unrelated, but I don't know. You
Yeah.
guys tell me, does it work or does it not work? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to offer something, Alex, on that vein. Something that Tamara brought up earlier was the issue of trust. When you're a founder, you have to trust the people you work with and your board members, and you have to delegate, right? You can't do everything on your own, even if it is your baby, like she said, and you want it to do well, and you're super fully invested. You still have to trust the people you work with. You still have to delegate out some of those responsibilities. So that's super important as a founder, as other positions too, but especially as a founder. And I think your ability to delegate and to trust other people, Alex, is prevalent in the way you steer your clubhouse as well. I mean, if you treat your employees and your clients and the people you work with, your colleagues, the way you work with us on Clubhouse, I feel like that's got to be a good system, because you allow people to innovate and you allow people to come up with their own style and their own vision, and that's what works, within a certain guideline, but not so far as you are doing everything and you are coming up with all the ideas. Some point you have to let go a little bit, and you have to trust the people you work with. I think that's so key. And I see that, even though I don't work for you, I see that in some of your extracurricular activities, in your the way you interact with other people. So I feel like that's key. I think that's super key. I wonder, Tamara, how your relationships were at the time, your professional relationships were at the time when you were feeling burnt out and overwhelmed, and how they are now. What's the difference?
So that's the thing. I never had a bad relationship with any of my staff members or any of my board members. It wasn't something to where we were things were contentious. People just didn't speak up because they were like, well, she's driving the organization, let's let her do it. When I wish they would have. I absolutely wish they would have. And Alex brought up a really good point about even being able to separate your social media. The only social media channel that I have that's my own is probably my LinkedIn and Facebook. I don't have a personal Instagram. It's a Music Beyond Measure Instagram. I don't have a personal Twitter. It's a MBM Twitter. Like I mean, and I'm very particular about what I put on my personal ones because I know that it's tied to the organization. People know that I run this I ran this organization, so I have to be careful about what I put online. And all of these different things, and that's the part where it is unhealthy, and it's amazing how uh whether or not you have a support system, well, a trustworthy support system, whether or not you have just the full support of the board. There are so many factors, but we never had like a bad relationship. We're all friends. And I think that you I've never felt that you should have a negative relationship with your board, but at the same time, there still needs to be a line as far as this is what we do, this is how we do it, and you have to be able to tell somebody no, even if they're the ones who started it. But then not just saying no just because, but saying no with the intent of, look, if you care so much about this organization, here's what we need you to do. Here's what you need to think about long term. Because the thing is, if someone would have sat me down and actually done that, I would have absolutely listened.
I think that's really interesting. And I think what Alex had brought up too about separating yourself from the brand, especially now, because I think people expect brands to be very personalized and attract kind of, attract people based on that, based on the fact that it's run by people. And people focused. And so then you are naturally, drawn into being part of that and trying to take control of it. If it's something that you really love, it's hard to step away. I think I have, control issues. I can see myself not wanting to give up control to other people. So I think that was a really interesting point of where to draw the line between yourself and the business. And I don't know if there's clear answers, but I think that was a really good point.
I love the fact, Tamara, that you said you wish somebody had stepped up. You wish somebody had said yes or no, or this looks good, or that doesn't look good. I wonder if there's a way to, now looking back, was there a way to perhaps elicit that response from your team members or your board members? I know I've I've felt this way in retrospect. I wish I had asked for something, or I wish I had asked for feedback, or some buy-in, or maybe some opposition. Sometimes push and pull is really important and very valuable when you are going in a specific direction. So I wonder if you have some thoughts about that now that perhaps you didn't consider at the time.
Well, that's the thing. I was asking for feedback. I was asking for help.
Ah, okay.
So it's not like I wasn't asking. I did recognize, like, maybe I didn't recognize the full breadth of how bad things were on my part, but I was asking for help. But here's where my own personal experience kind of made things worse. So if you're a person who has a history of being unsupported, whether by family or things like that, and you've been thrust into positions to where when you do ask for help, you get no response, or you get a lackadaisical response. That factors into, you know what, no problem, I'll do it myself. And that's what ended up happening. The times when I did ask for help, I don't know whether people just didn't have the time or felt like, well, she's got it, or I'm not sure. But I always felt that when I did ask for help, I felt that I was let down. And then because of that, then I said to myself, okay, no problem, I'll get it done. And then when you have that attitude of I'll get it done, yes, you get things done. However, you get burned out in the process, and that's training you to not ask for help in the future. And I think that's what was happening, to where it was something to where you know um I tried to ask for help and say, hey, could somebody do blah 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 blah. And if it wasn't done, I immediately lost trust because of my own history with that. And that's part of you know um part of how you lead. Like, I don't think we understand how our own, like, whether it's family trauma, or or just in general not feeling supported. When you feel those things, it's hard for you to really be able to ask for help, and then to be successful in the way that you want to be, because then you feel like, okay, well, I asked, no one answered, I just have to do this on my own. And you let that drive you moving forward, which is completely unhealthy.
That's so honest, Tamara. Thank you so much for sharing. The fact that you recognize that your family situation, your personal situation, or, certain things that happened in your past affect the way you respond to your board members or your or colleagues or clients now. I think that's key also. Going into a situation like that, becoming a founder or trying to be successful as a founder, probably um, knowing yourself very well, and how you might react to different situations or different people or their responses, depending on your background, your history, right? That would be important.
Thank you for joining us. Did you have a question for Tamara? Ronit?
Oh, hi, Tia. Sorry, I don't right now.
Hi.
I actually just joined the room. I was just starting to listen. I appreciate you bringing me up. Um, Give me a couple minutes, though. I definitely want to.
Okay, yeah. I think your
Thanks.
perspective would be great.
Yes,
She is a founder of a company called Blue Jean. So
correct.
she, so
Correct.
Ronit may have some insight there. If anyone
Yes.
else has questions or has experienced kind of this difficulty of separating yourself from your brand, please come to stage to talk about it.
So there's an interesting stat associated with this. Um, you know, having now that we invest in early stage companies, and we do a lot of founder fight moderation, mediation, and sometimes you have to replace founders and things like that. There comes a time in any brand, any company, that you really got to take the founder out. You know, um, Something like 40% of all founders, you know, are gone. As soon as they come to a level of success. Um, and oftentimes you see that that if it starts out with two founders, three founders, that one, two, sometimes all three of them leave, right? And it's because one, I see a startup as a baby, and it needs you know parents, when it's very young, unless so as it gets older, right? Um, so, for example, I'm here right now because my son is off doing homework on his own, right? Doesn't need my help. Um, and so there comes a time in every startup's existence, once it can be kicked out of the nest, and the nest is the founder, right? Nobody understands everything it needs unless unlike the founder. When you're only two people or you're only six people, nobody owns it like the founder, right? Nobody's responsible. So as a company gets bigger, like ours has, I've needed to hand off big chunks of things, and it's funny because somebody asked me about succession planning, and I joked and I said, well, Pat's my succession plan. But you know what? Ever since I said that, he's stepping up and he's doing. If you've heard him on Clubhouse before and after a couple of weeks ago, you can hear him, becoming, you know, the Alex, right? The MC, the person who will talk about, his experiences and make whatever the thing is relatable, right? I mean, it's not about my experiences; it's about making the idea of doing startups, the idea of doing healthcare innovation, of doing the what we call the geek to freak to hero path, which yes, I made up, but now he tells that spiel too, right? Um, anyway, so I guess my point is that there comes a time in every startup's life that it's ready to get away from just the founder branding, and I think it's a good thing, right? So as you were saying, I'm going to screw it up. It's not Tamara, Tamara. Um, sorry, I get like mental blocks with things
Woohoo!
like
You
that.
got it.
Yeah, I just got to remember to do exactly the opposite of what I want to do. So, um, but then again, so there's more than one option, right? It could be Tamara, it could be Tamara. Anyway, so I have to go to like the second most likely. Anyway, so where was I? Oh yeah, so of asking and not getting the answers, but people pick up nonverbal signals, or they pick up on all sorts of things that we don't even think about. And like you're saying, um, you have to be ready for it, but it's got and you have predisposed conditions, like that you felt like you have to take care of this because nobody else will. You can't count on people, but but the important thing is to send the signals saying, yes, I am receptive to this, even if it's counter to your nature. Even if you're a control freak, or you just you feel like you've been let down. Anyway, so I just think those are important elements to think about. Okay, I'm done speaking. Remember when people used to say that all the time? This is Alex, and I'm done speaking.
I am complete.
Yeah, I never really liked that one, because I'm never really complete. Or is my version of it is okay, I'll shut up, which I'm sure everybody's saying to themselves, please, Willie, just stop.
As long as you
More
say
like
Sarah.
Tamara. Yes. I admire you for what you've gone through. I've seen both sides of it. I worked in a lot of nonprofits, and I'm curious, just like, we're talking about branding here. Do you feel like how did you select your board? I'm curious of the process of that, because sometimes it's like, they're kind of figureheads. It's like a line. No, no offense to you. I'm just saying boards in general are a difficult mixture of people, and that in and of itself kind of contributes to the brand. Do you know what I mean? So I'd like to know what your process was and your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Sure, sure. So choosing my board, it definitely wasn't done in a day. It took a lot of time and a lot of really thinking about who do I want on my board. And I'm a person that I believe in energies as well. So I knew that I didn't want a certain type of energy on the board. And you can say that whether it was my control freak nature, I have no idea, but I just knew that certain types of energies that I knew I couldn't vibe with or talk to, or even have a regular conversation with, then we can't do business together. So it was, one thing I never did was I never put a family member on the board. I'm not saying that people haven't done it in a healthy way, but I just don't think it's right. um at the end of the day, just because it's, you eventually have to choose one or the other. But these were people that I met along my path of growing the organization. Maybe someone who volunteered, someone who I connected with, via like a conference or something like that. One time I actually did like a very focused board recruitment effort where I put together this whole presentation and just kind of reached out to different people and got board members that way. you know um, Definitely, whenever you're building your board, there are several resources. Like I think board source is a really good resource, because you have people who are on there, who they have certain organizations that they're hoping to be board members for, and it's a matter of putting your information out there, and maybe they'll find you, or you'll find them. But that's something that I wish I knew beforehand. But even more important than having the then building your board is knowing what to do with the board, and knowing the function of the board once you do have those people.
Yeah, that sounds so inorganic, to like outsource it like that. I feel like the cause and, people's passions for in a nonprofit, right?
Yeah, nonprofit. hmm uh, do you mean the board source?
Yeah, I mean, like,
uh
am I matrixing? I'm sorry, you guys.
no, it's fine. I mean, so I personally didn't use board source for that purpose, but they also have good information about how a board should function, governance, roles, things like that. That's really what I use it for. But I know that some people use it for that particular thing as well. Like for me, like I said, I had to be very particular about, and I was very particular about who I wanted on the board itself. But then I also knew that I wanted someone who had gone through some of our programs. I wanted to have at least one or two people who had gone through our programs to be on the board as well. Because you just need someone from the community that you serve, for, or for your target customer base. You need those people on the board to kind of give you a different perspective.
Excellent. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's great to know about those resources ahead of time, and to be able to use them for planning and moving forward. Tomorrow, what are your steps that you're taking as you hand off the org? Are you planning to be involved in any way, or are you going to make a clean break? What do you envision for the future?
I mean, it's a combination thereof. I'm going to be moving to a different state, so that's probably going to help the board. But uh, I am going to be involved in regards to any future training, for our teaching artists. That's something that the board chair and I discussed, because I'm the one who developed the program. So he was saying, well, that one, that is kind of hard to outsource because you did uh, develop that training program. So it's something to where once we get back to that point of training new teaching artists, we definitely want to pay you to come back and lead that. And I'm okay in that capacity, doing that, because then I know that I'm prepping future teaching artists to do the work that I started, so but at the end of the day, I'm still just focusing on the future, focusing on taking on a different leadership role, and then taking everything that I've learned about founder syndrome and everything that I was doing wrong, and really trying um, to be intentional about um, you know personal development, professional development, leadership development, all of those things, and just kind of knowing that, okay, I know that I don't want to make this mistake again. I know that I don't want my future employees to feel a certain way around me. I want them to always know that they can come and talk to me about any and everything, and they know that I'm here to listen and to be supportive. I don't want it to be something to where I'm so busy micromanaging and holding tightly to the reins that people feel like they can't flourish. So it's really made me think about, in a future leadership role, what experience I hope the employees and the board members will have, and then really trusting people to do their jobs, trusting the board to be a board, and to govern, to fundraise, whatever that particular function is, that they've decided for themselves, letting them do it, you know, uh, and kind of going from there. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, I could even see you running this as a workshop. How to not get founder syndrome. Um,
I absolutely
it's
would.
been, yeah, I think it would be great. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We're heading on the hour, so I'm gonna shut down if we don't have any more questions or audience um, participation. Last chance to ask. So I'll just go around then. Let me see. Okay, we have Med
Hi.
Starter. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for letting me up. This is the MedStarter brand. I would like to complain about Alex B. Fair. He really is just ruining everything for me, and I'd really like to fire him. He really needs to separate himself from his brand. So, Tamara, you notice that the brand actually can say your name properly. Um, I'd like, I'd like, I'd like you to talk to Alex about that. Just tell him to step away or something, please. Just can you do something about that?
Great, Al.
Sorry, sorry, I'm just
I
being
will
silly.
do my best.
Well, thank you, Alex and MedStarter, for your comments. We'll go around one time and just provide a takeaway from the room. Uh, we'll start with you, Tamara, and then we'll go to Dipti. Is if there's one takeaway you would like the audience to have from our discussion, what would that be?
Self-care as a leader is extremely important, because it allows you to be self-aware, and it allows you to really focus um, on being your best you, so that you can be the best leader. So if I had to tell any founder anything, you have to take the time to care for yourself, because you want to show up as your best you at all times. And if you don't take that time to do that, then you end up in a different place. You you end up in that space of being eternally exhausted and not knowing why.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point to always put yourself and your health at the front. And Dipti, did you have a takeaway that you wanted to share?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to you both. That was really excellent information. I look forward to this. Like, you should do a 201 and kind of, maybe we can get a little deeper and see if you feel like it. But thank you so much and appreciate you guys all. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Sophie, did you have a takeaway?
Yes, actually, for me, the thing that rung out really clear, loud and clear, was trust. The issue of trust that you brought up, and being able to trust your board members, your colleagues, the people that you build your brand with, or you build your innovation, your company with. You have to be able to, first of all, probably choose people who are trustworthy, right? I think you talked about how you chose your board members, and then also be able to relinquish some of the control and trust those people, delegate those responsibilities, and count yourself as human, and not just the founder, but a person, human, who needs sleep and food and rest and family and friends and all of the same things that everyone else needs. Just because you're a founder doesn't mean you need it. So that's what I'm getting from this room, and I'm sure we'll learn so much more if you come back. I hope you do. This is Sophie. I'm complete.
Thank you, Sophie.